I hate fighting games. Getting bodied over and over and over again by my friends, them expecting me to learn impossible to understand combos with difficult inputs and them spamming the same attack over and over again gets my blood boiling. I bet this mindset sounds familiar to quite a few fighting game enthusiasts and newcomers to the genre. These arguments reflect what I thought about fighting games about 2 years ago. It is easy to obtain such an impression of the genre, and there is a simple reason as to why many people perceive the genre like that. I would consider myself a beginner in fighting games. Back then, I only really liked Mortal Kombat. Why? Blood and Guts, of course. It was the first fighter which made me boot up training mode, and it inspired me to grind for skins and learn the fatalities of my favorite characters. And besides, it was and maybe still is the coolest fighter for a 14-year-old. Can't go wrong with ultra-violence. Over the course of the last 2 years, I have been more adventurous with the choice of games in the genre. Having explored different fighters to see what the genre has in store for me, I was surprised to learn how much fighting games offer in terms of mechanics, and on what any particular game focuses its gameplay on. My favorite games out of the bunch must be Street Fighter III Third Strike and Ultra Street Fighter IV. Games from a series that I ironically detested as an adolescent growing up. How come I grew to like them so much? Many reasons. Some rather superficial, others a bit more profound. For one, style matters, and Street Fighter oozes style in almost every aspect. From the crazy UI in Street Fighter Alpha, to the gorgeous flowing animations in Street Fighter 3, and of course the many beautiful fighters to pick from. Men and women have something to look at for once, and is good like that. The music also has been a strong suit of the series, featuring many jungle, house and breakbeat tracks to even rather good dubstep compositions from Street Fighter 4. The reason I keep playing Street Fighter for hours on end does not lie in the style or music or the sexy women. Well, for the most part. I mostly come back for the gameplay at hand. Street Fighter seems like a simpler game when compared to other fighters in the genre. Every character has a handful of attacks. There are throws, special attacks, and blocking is achieved by walking backwards. Fair enough. Depending on whether a character is a grappler, charger, or doesn't fit those categories, you can figure out special attacks rather easily by utilizing random movements like quarter, half, and full circles, or Z motions, or different charging maneuvers paired with an attack as an additional input. Upon hearing this, you might feel confident, until you boot up arcade mode. Then you get destroyed by bots. There is far more to unpack than meets the eye here. Street Fighter is filled to the brim with subsystems any newcomer will never, ever suspect. What happens, for instance, when you use a normal attack in Ultra Street Fighter 4? Now see what happens when you stand a little bit closer to your opponent. Those seem like completely different attacks, but they are in fact triggered by the same button input. Another system older Street Fighter games have, specifically Street Fighter 3, is a parry system, at which I suck at. Other than that, the later games of the series introduced a variety of systems, ranging from ultras, supers, focus attacks, and to V-triggers and more. Street Fighter also doesn't make it easy for the player to chain attacks together into long combos. Street Fighter V simplifies the combat by allowing the player to perform a link attack in 3 frames instead of 1, making combos a bit easier. Additionally, it grants the player some aids in terms of button inputs, sometimes even allowing wrong but similar commands to activate the attack. Even with this help, expect to get bodied over and over and over again. Speaking of frames, many people getting into fighting games might ask themselves, what the hell frame data is? In every fighting game, attacks and even certain movement options feature charge up and cooldown frames in which a player is vulnerable. A frame is a single image of the video feed you are seeing on your screen. Street Fighter runs on 60 FPS, thus making a single frame link attack only possible in a 60th of a second. On top of these systems, Street Fighter offers another mechanic called teching. A player can tech a throw, resulting in a cancelled throw, or tech his falls to either land on his feet in a light knockdown or elongating the time spent on the ground on a hard knockdown. Most games in the series are rather similar, but each one tends to possess a gimmick or two, which is exclusive to the game. Street Fighter Alpha revamped many controls and added 3 different specials each fighter can utilize, while Street Fighter 4 has focus attacks and ultra combos, while the 5th entry in the series offers V skills and V triggers. There are a lot of minute details which I could bring up, but I think that the before mentioned explanation of the mechanics showcase well enough what Street Fighter offers. Street Fighter is all about execution, especially in the older games. Parrying every hit, focus cancelling, teching throws, hell, even things like knowing when to use a certain attack is incredibly important in Street Fighter. Another big part of Street Fighter, which carries over into most, if not all other fighting games, is Footsies. Footsies describes a mid-range movement game in a match, which consists of quickly moving into an opponent's attack range and dashing out of it. It seems simple enough, but it really isn't. For being good at Footsies, the player is pretty much required to getting the movement of the game down. At many times, relearning the movement for specific characters is essential. A good example would be Makoto in Street Fighter. This very angry karate master has an unusually slow walk cycle, but she is simultaneously the fastest fighter in the entire game. Her dash is quick and covers a lot of ground. Mastering Makoto requires an understanding of both her attacks and more than average knowledge of how her movement works. Also, hitboxes aren't as simple as you might think at first. Every game has its own quirks, and every character has their own curious hitboxes. A good example of this are grappler characters, since the range of their input grabs feel like an enigma to me. When compared to other fighting games, we can see that Street Fighter is unique on its own rights, with its simple to learn attacks yet incredibly hard to master background mechanics. Tekken is another series I played a lot of games of. Tekken is a clunkier experience, and depending on the game, moves can be harder or easier to pull off. Tekken 3 feels a bit more precise, while newer games like Tekken Tag Tournament 2 and Tekken 7 feel a bit more streamlined for newer audiences. Tekken is a 3D fighter, meaning that a fighter can move forward and backward, but also left and right. Combat is drastically different, mostly consistent of ground combat and utilizing an entire sandbox of possible attacks to chain together into combos. Remember that Street Fighter has a handful of attacks per character? Tekken lends its characters hundreds of possible attacks and combos. When compared to Street Fighter, Tekken maps its 4 attack buttons to the left and right arms and legs respectively, and combat plays out in an asymmetric form. In Street Fighter, an attack input is simply mirrored when the player ends up on the other side. So, quarter circle forward punch for Ryu's Hadouken obviously turns into a quarter circle backward punch. In Tekken, the buttons for each specific limb always stay the same, but for certain special attacks, the player has to adjust what leg or arm to use for the attack. Tekken also has way more throws to experiment with, and initiating an infinite combo is way easier. As our last example, we should take a look at an anime fighter. Anime fighters are infamous for their ludicrously long combos. In an anime fighter, each attack deals less damage when compared to fighters like Street Fighter or Tekken, since they tend to be combo based. There are many good examples, Guilty Gear, Blast Blue, and Darkstalkers being some of them, but one game stands out to me personally, namely, King of Fighters 13. This entry into the King of Fighters series is especially nice to me due to its incredibly gorgeous art style. It may be the most beautiful sprite-based game I have seen in the fighting game genre, littered with modern effects and deliciously fluent animations. King of Fighters is incredibly difficult to learn, due to its long combos and intricate movement. Dodging has its own dedicated button, while sprinting or dashing works exactly like in other games by pushing forward or backward twice. The game even differentiates a long and short jump. Obviously, you might have noticed that movement is incredibly important in this game. Paired with links and sometimes complicated special attack execution, King of Fighters forces you to become the king of precise button inputs. If you mastered King of Fighters, you hopefully mastered inputs in the process. Every fighting game teaches you something. Tekken forces you to stay alert and change your strategies all the time if the opponent knows how to use dozens of different attacks. While Street Fighter teaches you about split-second decision-making and precision. Experience in any fighting game carries over naturally, making you a better player on the whole. If it wasn't for one thing.
Somebody get this out of my motherfucking chat, you dumb black ass. Get the fuck out of my motherfucking chat. Sick of seeing your black ass in my motherfucking room. Don't you get the message, bitch? I don't want you here, spook.
Some of the most important lessons taught by fighting games all have to do with mindset and humility. The player has to be open-minded enough to take the losses and try to learn from their mistakes, while also having an urge to improve in the game. There's not much fun in playing a fighting game you don't understand and responding to defeat with immature behavior, such as blocking the opponent from fighting you again, or insulting the opponent for being a scrub. You can easily become a sore loser, making you enjoy the game even less. Decent or even really good players stunt themselves very frequently by being toxic in general. Best example,
You know me as
low tier God. The lack of self-reflection and humility hinders low-tier God from improving and climbing into the professional landscape in the games he plays. What is a bigger shame is that LTG even stunted his professional gaming career through his persistent toxic behavior. Do not be the next LTG, but try to learn from your mistakes to ultimately become the superior fighting game player. Shaking bad attitude may be the hardest thing to learn from fighting games. So, I can recommend some things that helped me personally. For one, you can try to get into a game with a friend who is similarly skilled as you. If possible, you can even establish a group to play fighting games together with, making play sessions way more exciting and much more of a learning process due to different playstyles clashing each other. Try to avert your attentions away from the mindset of your opponent sucking at the game to trying to notice what you could have done better. You lost for a reason, so try and figure out why you didn't. Lastly, try to genuinely have a good time. Games aren't just about raw skill, of course. If you genuinely dislike a game, there is no need to force yourself to play it. A good example for me would be Super Smash Bros. I dislike that game with a passion, and no matter how many more complex games I play, I will never grasp the appeal and mechanics of that game. In conclusion, I grew to love fighting games. They might not offer hundreds of hours worth of story and quests, but what they do offer is an experience which will take you months and years to master, if you're up for it. Improvement is fun, and sharing your knowledge with your friends does not only make you better, but it makes your friends into better opponents who constantly raise the bar against you. Losing sucks, but winning can feel so much better. Especially after exciting matches in which both you and your opponent have no idea how it might turn out. Sometimes it can be just fun to spam attacks over and over again, until your opponent finds an exit strategy out of your relentless offense. And yes, that is a valid strategy. It's called zoning.
You could say that I am in the zone.
You're a warrior, you are a beginner.
You get it because it's a zoner.
I am glad that I ventured into the world of fighting games. Even though I tend to get my shit pushed in a lot. Have you made up your mind about fighting games? If you did, I would love you to join my Discord server. In my Discord server, I even created specific channels for fighting games, like Tekken and Street Fighter. So, if you're up for a match, hop on in, ask for a match, and we most likely can get together in a game or two and beat the crap out of each other. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.